Hey everybody, I'm Elisa and welcome back. We are doing the nervous system and we're talking about the brain. So this time we are going to look at this really cool structure called the cerebellum and also some very complicated but very interesting structures called the limbic system. And we're just going to hit the basics. Shouldn't be too terrible. So the cerebellum, it's like, sitting kind of, here's, the rest of the, oh, that was terrible. Cerebrum, right? So this is the cerebrum up here. And so, like, the cerebellum sits back here behind pons. You remember the pons. And it kind of adjusts itself a little bit to be even like, it's like a mini second brain. And it's really interesting in the way that it's shaped, right? So it has these, like, here's the white matter tracks on it, right? As you can see here. And then the gray matter tracks, there's just so much. So remember back when we were looking at all of the like Evo Devo video, right? And we talked about how we have all these like sulci and gyri and especially the fissures, and they make all this new space so we can have more and more gray matter. Well, look at all the gray matter there is here, right? It's incredibly high density, right? Look at the, wow, fissures. So anyway, it's, what it means is this is, here, let me make this smaller. There it is. Okay, getting smaller. There it is. Okay. It means that it's small, right? It's only 11% of the brain mass. And it's located dorsal to pons and medulla, right? So pons does a lot of the talking from the other parts of the brain to cerebellum, right? So it processes information from the cortex, the brainstem, and sensory. Like basically, here's what happens. As far as we know, cerebellum hangs out right here, kind of monitoring, like almost policing what's happening, coming up and down through the brainstem area, right? And what it does is we think it might do a lot of editing. Okay, we think it might be editing a lot of stuff. So maybe you're having some of your higher order functions over here, some logic, or maybe we're thinking, oh, well, should I wear this? Or like, oh, does like cosine, blah, 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 like all of this. And so what we're thinking is there might be some organization that cerebellum does. But what the thing about cerebellum that's so tricky, cerebellum, is that it's not a conscious part of the brain. We don't control it as far as we know consciously. We believe it calculates, it does precision, and it does not want anything. It does not want to talk to us at all. And that's probably good. We might be a little distracting. Anywho, right. So, and we know it plays a huge role in balance. That also means it's working to provide precise and coordinated movement throughout the body. So cerebellum, we do know, is a fine tuner of motor activity. And so some of it works to initiate the voluntary muscle contractions. Also, it works with Prio Preceptors. Like Prio Preceptors kind of are these receptor type processing units in the body, and they help you understand like where your body is in space and also in time in some cases. Proprioception is happening a lot. You're feeling where you are when you're maybe running, right? You feel if you're kind of leaping into the air, if your balance is going off, you're going to shift your weight, you're going to extend your leg. A lot of things that we don't really think about the complexity of just simple, like, run up the street motions actually is a huge amount of calculation. And so we're glad that cerebellum's there and likes to do that kind of math. Because it's throughout the body and it's all the time. A lot of it's also visual, and we talked also about equilibrium processing or equilibrium establishment as well. So the pathways are always kind of like, like we said, it sits there and it's informing the body about how it's moving, about where it is during that motion and what motions are likely to come next. So make those smooth coordinations, right? It also sends like its edits or the blueprint of that motion to the cerebral motor cortex and the brainstem nuclei. So it does talk to the more conscious parts of your brain. But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting way that it kind of goes about it. So cognitive functions of the cerebellum. So we think it's involved in thinking actually, and language and emotion, because all of those are also very coordinated actions. Like there's a lot of editing that goes into those if you're gonna do it right. Right. So it does it for not just motor processing, but also for decision making. Right. So it helps us to make those like fine adjustments. And oh, sorry, it's also supposed to help us predict outcomes as well, which is really neat. And see like how much they align to what we're actually expecting. So here we go. Let's move on to the next one. So this is limbic system, right? So here with cerebellum, okay, monitoring all that stuff, and so we'll talk a little bit more about this. But first, I want to show you where all the structures are. So it's in the insular inside part of the brain, and it's going to be closely associated to a lot of the white fiber tracts, right? White matter tracts. So we have the diencephalon, which is an early developer. So this is also associated with mammillary body or mammillary body, and hypothalamus. It's also right next to the third ventricle, which is holding a whole bunch of that cerebral spinal fluid as well. Okay, so those are deep-seated areas in the brain. Septum pellucidum is going to have like a little bit larger projection over here. It's very nearby the corpus callosum, which is not technically limbic, but white fiber tracts anyways. The fornix and anterior commissure are found down here, so they're kind of like more regional areas of this kind of like twisting superstructure. As well as are some of these. So the cerebral structures include things like cingulate gyrus, septal nuclei, amygdaloid body, good old hippocampus. What are your emotions today? The dentate gyrus and parahippocampal gyrus. So like the thing is you see gyrus a lot, right? You're seeing gyrus, and then you're also seeing things like nuclei and body. So the gyri are referring again to like kind of these like regions that might have more twist in them, whereas the nuclei are like more focused, for example, and the bodies seem to be like a little bit more focused in, right? Yeah, you can see, yeah. So it kind of just is what that's referring to. Let's talk about what those things are and what they do now that you kind of generally know where they are. So they're not like as easy to pick out as parietal lobe or occipital lobe, but you get the general zip code of where everybody lives. Okay, so for amygdaloid body, what this does is it's actually really important. Humans are like really big time face readers. Like we have the ability to see someone's face and not see them again for decades and decades and decades, and then see them again, and maybe they have aged, maybe, oh, sorry. It's so early, I need more coffee. But to understand these facial expressions and help us figure out what the group is communicating or the other individual feels towards us. Is it happiness, or is it, oh, we're in trouble, we're in danger, fight or flight? And it helps us have like a response right away. So like one of the ones that you might be familiar with, especially with the people that you live with, is somebody might be in your kitchen. Let's say it's like your spouse is in your kitchen and they're looking at something and they're making this like really frustrated like face. Like oftentimes it's compulsory for most people to ask about it, or like what's wrong, or what's going on, or like why are you mad, or why are you always mad at me, like make these kind of assumptions oftentimes based on that facial expression. So just be kind of aware of that. It's very evocative. Also, Cingulate Gyrus is helpful in expressing our emotions via gestures. So as you know, it's not quite the same. Like I know you guys probably want to see a picture of me giving this lecture, but I can promise you that, maybe after my first or second cup of coffee, I'll start thinking about doing that way. But it does really help you understand how to express emotions, and even how to understand other people's emotions because of their body posture. Is it aggressive? Is it relaxed? Is it engaged? And it also helps us like kind of process a little bit of our conflicts, our emotional conflicts. All right, limbic system. I love smell. I love the sense of smell because of mainly food. Like food is just the thing. And so I probably love it because it's such an emotional response. I don't know if you remember, like, here, let me just, like, here's a brain. Your little brain. Boop, boop. And then, so here's your olfactory nerves, right? And your olfactory nerves and your olfactory center, like, back right into your brain, right? And they're in here. And they're tucked up all nice and tight with your limbic system. So they're all integrated super well, right? And so it's very different from, like, say, here's your eyes, right? Here's like some eyes. And then here's like your visual association and processing cortices, right? It's not really going super through, it's not so closely associated, for example. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So you do tend to have more emotional responses, they believe, because of proximity. Because, you know, once your neurons start firing over here, they're active, and then they start firing all the other neurons in the area. And a lot of those neurons are going to be ones that are processing emotions. That also helps with memory, right? So olfactory is really highly associated with things like being able to remember, because that's what your emotions do. Your emotions exist to teach you. And remember, sometimes they can be wrong. But anyway, see, here's like an emotional thing. Oh, you got to smell. You smell skunks, and you've decided you feel bad about that. I feel bad about that. It's a bad smell, right? So that's why smells can be things like good or bad or, whatever. Okay, so most output is relayed through the hypothalamus. Sorry, back on track now. Hypothalamus is interesting because when we deal with certain illnesses, like psychosomatic illnesses, they have an origin in the psyche, right? And a lot of that means that we're doing processing, and a lot of this is going to be tied with our emotional perception and probably response. So hypothalamus is right in the middle of that as well. Okay. Limbic system is going to interact quite a bit with the prefrontal lobes, right? Because remember, it helps us teach. If you're watching this and you are so bored emotionally, then you're not going to learn anything. Some people, like, if you are watching this and you are somehow emotionally engaged in this, like, I don't know, slide, it's just here, makes you a happy emotion maybe. What's going to happen is you tend to remember it better. It like gets stuck in there nice and deep, right? Than if you're bored. Like boredom, it's like things just like hit and they bounce right off because you're not emotionally engaged, right? So you don't really have an integration for that at a biochemical and truly biological generally level. So it allows us to react emotionally to things that we're consciously understand to be happening, and that helps us to learn, right? That's why we care. It makes us aware consciously of things like emotions in our lives because they are evocative, right? And then down here also hippocampus and amygdaloid body also, because of all of this, as we're learning, it plays a big, severe, important role in memory, obviously, because it's teaching us stuff, right? So that's good. So hopefully you are emotionally engaged in like a happy way, right? You're like super happy. And I don't know, maybe you're smelling some nice smells during the lecture, and then your limbic system is like lighting up like so much, causing all this emotion, and then you're going to start remembering things long term from this lecture, right? I think that's why they tell you to chew peppermint gum to remember. All right, I'm off to get my cup of coffee. You poor things had to listen to me this early in the morning. So I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed learning the basics about the limbic system. Goodbye.